The topic today is the Freedom Ride, and we are talking to a participant in the Freedom Rides in 1961. Mr. Walker, let's look at your participation in the Freedom Rides. I think you've already indicated that you were part of the human rights or the civil rights movement in Nashville, and that you participated in the sit-ins and et cetera. Talk about how you felt in terms of, in a real sense, putting your life in jeopardy, and explain to our audience exactly what these rides were all about and the tours that, about where you went and et cetera.
Okay, well, I began my participation in the Freedom Ride after it had started in Washington, D.C. They went to Anniston, and I believe they went to Montgomery, and after some violence with the bus along the route, people gathered in Montgomery, if I'm not mistaken, and before we went to Montgomery, there was a lot of discussion here in Nashville about whether or not we should take up the Freedom Ride. CORE started it, but after the violence, it seemed that some of the wind was taken out of their sails, and the Nashville group, after much heated debate, decided to go ahead and try to keep the Freedom Ride going. Because, as you may or may not know, in those days, blacks were relegated to the back of the bus, and you had to use the colored waiting room. And that, by the way, reminds me of one of the things that, as a youngster, I never could reconcile. I remember we would be traveling, our family, in some place in the South, and we'd stop for gas, and you would see signs at the gas station for the restrooms, men, women, and colored. And I always wondered how it was that even though a men's restroom and a women's restroom were necessary for white people, why there were not two restrooms for people of African descent. But it was only later that I realized this was a part of the whole dehumanizing aspect of segregation. But the point is that you asking me is about the Freedom Rides. Yeah, okay, so it was tough for black people to travel interstate commerce in the South. And so, as we know, the Freedom Rides were a test of the ICC regulation that prohibited segregation on interstate carriers. So after the violence, we decided we'd go ahead, we'd go to Montgomery, and we'd try to ride the bus from Montgomery to Jackson. There were those of us who had had some experience with this type of thing, with the sit-in movements here in Nashville. And so we knew it was a risky business, and there were some people who actually made out wills and so forth. But the thing about it was, you knew that segregation was a humiliating experience. You knew it was something that denied your humanity in the most fundamental way. In effect, you knew that the white man had his foot on your neck. So even though it was a risk to do something that might cure this racist disease afflicting America, we knew that whatever that had a chance of changing the situation was worth the risk, because the conditions of being treated as a second-class citizen were difficult to tolerate. So there were several of us who drove down in a car to Montgomery. We knew that people were going to converge on Montgomery, pick up the ride, and we were all black males, and we knew that a car full of black males would be highly suspect as far as the police were concerned. So we decided that if we were stopped by the police, we would say we were a singing group and we were going to perform at a church. And some of the fellows could sing. I couldn't sing, so I always thought if we had to stop and prove that we were singers, I'd have to sing in a very low voice. But fortunately, we made it from Nashville to Montgomery without incident. And we arrived at the home of a Dr. Harris there in the Montgomery, very nice house. And there were a good number of people converging on Montgomery at the time. We all met at Dr. Harris's house. I remember getting there the night before the bus left Montgomery for Jackson. The one thing that stands out in my memory of that night, we had a big meeting in a room there in the house where students from various schools around the country, various other individuals in different capacities, all converged on the House because we wanted to push on with the Freedom Ride. And there was a great debate with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And I do remember being one of the people that actually led the debate with Dr. King. We felt that Dr. King should not get on that bus. We felt he was far too valuable to be risked on the bus, and Dr. King argued with us for quite some time about why he should get on the bus. But the feeling was so strong that we valued Dr. King so much as the star of the movement, as our major spokesman. We told him that the general stays behind while the troops go to the front line, and we didn't want to risk him on the bus. So after several hours of argument, he finally relented and agreed with us that he would not get on the bus. And I just want to make this very clear because in a book which came out in 1998, David Halberstam, in the book The Children, gives an opposite account. And I just would like to clarify this for the record.
As a participant, a person who was there, eyewitness.
I argued personally with Dr. King that we didn't want him on the bus. We didn't want to risk him. And I do not feel that David Halberstam has done a good. I feel David Halberstam has done the movement a disservice with this misrepresentation of the facts. If you read some of the literary criticism of some of his works, you know he's got more than half a dozen books, been on the New York Times bestseller list. Numerous critics accuse him of being footloose and fancy with the facts. Even some of them say he invents what he doesn't know. So I feel that this particular instance in The Children, along with several other instances in this same book, without factual foundation. The ride to Jackson from Montgomery was memorable. We boarded the bus in Montgomery without incident, and we rode, I remember going across the state line from Alabama to Mississippi, and if I'm not mistaken, the first town there was Meridian, Mississippi. And being the curious sort of fellow I was, I walked to the front of the bus and looked at the speedometer. The bus was doing 95 miles an hour.
Okay, and let's stop right here for this commercial break. Mr. Walker, we'll come back and pick up at this particular point, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Segment of the show for today.